everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here on the porch for another Porch podcast. And who is joining me but Manny Hill? What is going on, Manny? Great to see you. A beautiful day outside. I'm trying to take advantage of summer, so I have moved the studio and the video camera and everything out here onto my porch. And we picked a beautiful day. It's
perfect. You got a great, spacious porch. It's a great setup. And when I pulled in here this afternoon, I was blown away by your wonderful setup here. It looks great.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So this week, I told you, is Random Questions Week. So I have a bunch of random questions for you. You have a bunch of random questions for me. And people can still continue to send their random questions. PurpleInsider.com, a great place to do it. Or if you want to hit me up on Twitter, at Matthew Coller, feel free to sneak into my DMs and ask a question there. But I'm going to start out with this. So my wife watched Back to the Future for the first time ever. She had never seen Back to the Future before. And it holds up pretty well. Not the second one. The first one holds up pretty well, I think. The second one is just the first one again. And I don't think I realized that when I saw them 3 years apart, but I definitely realized it when we watched them back to back. So anyway, it got me thinking about how we usually talk about Vikings history, which is a bunch of what ifs. Hey, what if Gary Anderson made the kick? Then they might have won the Super Bowl. So I wanted to put a Back to the Future spin on this for Random Question Week. And my random question to you is, if you had the ability to go back in the DeLorean into Vikings history, what would you change? And also, here's the other part of this. You have to tell me, Manny, how you're going to change it. Because in the movie, he has to, sorry if this is spoiling it for anyone, he has to go back in time and he messes something up. So then he has to get his parents together so he can be born and have a family and a life, right? So you not only have to go back in time to fix something in Vikings history, but you also have to explain to me how you're going to do it. So what are you fixing? How are you fixing it? Go.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the 1998 NFC Championship game, and I'm not going to talk about Gary Anderson missing the kick. I'm going to go to even an earlier point of that game because that was in the fourth quarter. The Vikings could have gone up by 10 and possibly put Atlanta away and go on to the Super Bowl. But I'm going to take it a step further and go back further back in that game. I'm going to go back to the end of the first half where the Vikings have a 20-7 lead. And they have the ball deep in their own territory. I think they were inside their own 25-yard line. It was a little over a minute left in the first half. And the Vikings are they're just getting really, really greedy. They're trying to, dagger the Falcons, and they're trying to get another touchdown on the board to maybe go up by 20 before the end of the first half. We all know what happens there. Chuck Smith goes around the edge on Todd Stussy, strip sacks Randall Cunningham. The Falcons recover the fumble. And the very next play, Chandler throws a touchdown pass. I think it might have been to Tony Martin, but I can't remember who the receiver was. But that touchdown made it 20-14 at halftime, completely changed the game the rest of the way, and the Falcons really kind of dominated the game the rest of the way. So my change is to go back and to tell Denny Green, don't be so greedy. You're in good shape. You got the ball at your own 20-yard line. You're running the risk of a turnover here, and that could drastically change this game. So the best way I can think of to get this message to Denny.
That was going to be my next question.
Yes.
How exactly are you going to tell Denny Green this message?
I am going to try my best. I'm going to go back in time months and months and months earlier in the season. And I'm going to get myself on the Vikings coaching staff somehow, some way. How I'm going to do it, I have no idea. But I'm going to get myself onto the Vikings coaching staff as some sort of offensive analyst or something, some sort of made-up job. And we're going to go through the season. It's going to be a long process, but we're going to go through the season, and I'm going to get into Denny's ear right before that moment because I'll have the ability to do that because I'll be on the sidelines. And I'm going to tell Denny, let's relax here. Let's hand the ball off to Robert Smith and Leroy Hoard here. And if one of them pops off a good run, then maybe we can try and get in the position, maybe kick a field goal before the end of the half. But let's not get too crazy here. We're in control of this game. Let's play it safe.
All right, so you have to probably go back even farther to forge some sort of career in football and then work your way into getting hired by the Minnesota Vikings and then earn the trust of Denny Green to the point where he's going to listen to you. I think this is going to be tough. I mean, maybe there is so I had this idea about Favre's interception, the 12 men in the huddle right before the interception. My idea was to be a ball boy and forget the ball. Instead of like tossing it into the referee, be like, oh, I fumbled the ball, and hope that within a few seconds of the ball boy screwing around and everyone going, what is this ball boy doing? He's fumbling the ball. He threw it over the referee's head, that either the referee does not see the 12 men in the huddle or that they go, wait, don't go on the field. We're going to have 12 men in the huddle. That's not the personnel package. So maybe there's something like that for you where you get to be a ball boy and you walk up to Denny Green and you say, don't pass the ball here. And maybe he says, well, man, that's strange. I've never had a ball boy. He must be from the future. But otherwise, I think that's going to be pretty tough. The other one might be to go back and become friends, which you are now with the long snapper, and tell him, hey, take a deep breath before you snap that ball. It's a little high, right?
Yes.
Maybe because it's not that hard. It's probably hard to become friends with Denny Green or Randy Moss or someone like that, but it might not be that hard to be friends with Mike. He can, right? He's a very affable guy.
Yeah.
He was probably in local establishments. You maybe talk to him about that moment. Hey, just one thing. If there's ever a big moment here, take one extra deep breath and try to snap it a little bit lower, and then maybe Gary Anderson's kick goes in.
I like it. I could probably pull that off. A very young Mike Morris probably wouldn't know who the hell I am, but I could probably develop a pretty good relationship with him, though.
You know the Vikings, of course, and you would already know so much about his team. You could strike up a football conversation. You're a friendly guy. That's maybe a way to do it. If you got to be friends with Todd Stussy, maybe tell him to watch out for this particular move that Chuck Smith liked to put on because he was a great player. I think those are definitely ways to do it. Is there a way to prevent Teddy's injury? Because that was one I was trying to think of. And I don't really know what that would be because it was such a random and strange and fluky thing. And
it was non-contact, right?
Right. And people still wonder, did someone step on him? Is there some mystery there? I've never heard anybody confirm something like that. But if you could prevent Teddy from going to practice that day, then maybe he doesn't step weird and have the entire career altered in that moment. But how would you prevent him from I know, I've got it.
Okay.
You crash his car. He's on the way. He's on the way to practice, and you crash his car in a way that he couldn't get hurt. You just T-bone him at a slow speed.
Maybe this sounds a little bit morbid and evil. Could you just like slash his tires? Maybe
could slash his tires
before he even comes out, and so he's late. And
but he's Teddy's going to find a way. He would have someone. He would call someone and have him pick him up. He's not going to just say someone slashed my tires. I can't come to practice. But all the other options seem much worse. Or maybe there was something hidden in his knee that was going to reveal that this was going to happen, so you could somehow suggest that he get an MRI. But even finding a way to do that is very difficult. Get that message to him, because if you sent a letter to Teddy Bridgewater or a DM on social media and said, get an MRI, be like, who is this lunatic?
Right.
People send me stuff like that. There's weird, the Vikings theories and stuff that you just ignore. So I don't know. I don't know how to prevent it.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, and before the injury, was there any sort of indication from anybody that there was anything wrong with his knee whatsoever? No. Because that's the crazy part about that is it just came out of nowhere. There was nothing, he didn't, because I think that was after that third preseason game against the Chargers where Teddy had that really good first drive. And he looked great, and there was no sort of indication that, Teddy's walking off the field and he's got a little bit of he's kind of walking gingerly. Looks like his knee is sore. There was nothing like that. So it's like, how do you even know that something like that is going to happen? Do you just go back and say, no, Teddy, don't go out there. Just trust me, don't go out there. And
I mean, do you call it a bomb threat? Like that seems to be too far for even this game.
Yeah.
To be talking about that. But, I mean, is there any way to keep him off the practice field? You could drive your car all over the Winter Park practice field and wreck the field so they had to practice indoors. You would go to jail, but you could just claim drunk and disorderly and pay the fine and prevent Teddy Bridgewater, and no one would ever know. They would laugh at it. Hey, remember that crazy radio guy who pulled some stunt and drove on Winter Park's field? Could you get in there, though? There was a fence, but it wasn't an impressive fence. You could smash right through. You got a big enough truck. You got an SUV. You could just smash right through it.
Yeah. Well, and especially if we're taking a DeLorean time machine, if we're going back, I mean, we could just
easily.
DeLorean's as durable as it gets. I mean, you could crash that thing, you could flip that thing over 20 times and it'd be fine. So,
I don't know if there's a way to prevent Blair Walsh from shanking wide to the left. Probably not. I think that was going to happen one way or another. No way to really prevent Dante from getting hurt when he did. Just a random fluky thing that you would have thought was a normal injury, and it turned out not to be. Trying to think if there's other ones. I mean, 38-7, no way to prevent that unless you stole the Eagles' defensive or offensive playbook and gave it to Zimmer. But I think they were losing that game no matter what, that they were emotionally spent, similar to the Lynx after their Commissioner's Cup victory, melting down as they did just before we were doing this podcast. But that's the most challenging part. We all know what we would change, but figuring out how you're going to change it. How do you get them, for example, to draft, say, Jalen Hurts instead of Jeff Gladney? Or, I mean, Antoine Winfield Jr. probably doesn't change their fate entirely, but we talked, because we were on the radio at that time, so much about Jalen Hurts and how there might be an opportunity. There were 2 first-round draft picks. They had extended Kirk in 2020, but you still were talking about a short-term extension and a project-type quarterback that if you take him as a luxury pick in the first round, kind of as Atlanta took Michael Penix, although he's probably closer to being ready than Jalen Hurts, how could you convince Rick Spielman? Because they were so much in win now mode, even if as the roster was resetting and after they traded Stephon Diggs, everyone's jobs were under pressure. I don't know how to, I mean, you would have to take on a job in scouting and somehow pound the table louder inside of the room that Jalen Hurts was going to be great. I really don't know a way to get them to pick, or Jordan Love, honestly. But but Love was taken in between Jefferson and Gladney. So if you were still sitting at, I think, was he the 30th pick or something? I don't know if there's a way to do that.
Well, and I would even go back a couple of years prior to that, because that was 2020. So you go back a couple of years prior to that, and you've brought this up in the past. How do you convince Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer to, instead of investing a 3-year fully guaranteed contract in Kirk Cousins, to go back into the draft and take Lamar Jackson? And maybe you bring back Case Keenum or Sam Bradford or somebody as sort of a bridge guy. Like you knew that the 3 quarterbacks that were on the roster in 2017, that none of those guys, Teddy because of his injury, Sam Bradford because of, he was getting a little older and he was having some knee problems. In Case, you just kind of realized that Case just wasn't going to be a long-term answer. You knew none of those guys were going to be your future starter, but you could bring one of them back as like a bridge guy, and then you do sort of a soft reset with Lamar Jackson without the pressure of having to put him out there right away. And, if they would have brought Case Keenum back in 2018, they wouldn't have gone 6-10 or anything like that. They still would have been a pretty competitive team. I mean, they ended up going 8-7-1 anyway, so who's to say it would have been much worse than that?
Oh, it would have been a lot better than that if they had drafted Lamar Jackson in the long term. That's for 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson.
Right.
And every once in a while that will get brought up and someone will say, well, Zimmer would have ruined him. I don't know about that. I think that Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP, too good to ruin.
I think Mike Zimmer would have loved coaching Lamar Jackson because Lamar's really good at taking care of the football. He's not reckless. He makes enough plays. He's a great leader. He's shown we've seen all of this stuff now develop over the last, 6 years since he's been in the league. I think Mike Zimmer would have loved coaching Lamar Jackson, much like he loved coaching Teddy Bridgewater.
Well, and what does he like more than anything? Running the football,
yes.
Which not only Lamar Jackson does it himself, but also the running backs who play with Lamar Jackson seem to always have a ton of success, which may be the case for Derrick Henry this year, who I was reminded the other day is a Baltimore Raven. It's very strange to forget most of the offseason for other teams and be like, oh, yeah, that's right. Maybe that's a podcast. Do you remember this guy plays for that team? But I agree with you. The leadership element, how quickly he developed and came along, and he does have that baller nature to him, which I think Mike Zimmer did like and praised quarterbacks. I don't think that he liked just every Alex Smithian quarterback, because he would praise the heck out of people like Lamar Jackson and Drew Brees and Joe Burrow, the playmakers. And if anything, I think he wanted that a lot more from Kirk Cousins. They make a play sometimes, it's going to bail me out. So that was my random question for you. There's a lot of meat on that bone. Feel free to leave in the comments or email me what you would change and also how you would change it. Again, I don't know. Do I put together a dossier for Rick and slide it under his door or something? Or maybe I have to introduce him to someone who knows Lamar, who he would respect and listen to. But I don't know if I was going to be able to move that needle at all. They thought they desperately needed a cornerback. This is why Michael Penix is a good pick, by the way.
Yeah.
You always need a corner, but you can find a corner. You can't find your next franchise quarterback. Anyway.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
So Lamar went to Louisville. Who was coaching Louisville at that time?
Oh, my gosh. It was Bobby Petrino.
Oh, okay.
Who Mike Zimmer is a huge fan of.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe that conversation wouldn't have gone over so
Yeah,
well.
I don't think that would have worked out. I don't think they've talked, would be my guess.
Yeah.
If for those who don't know, Mike Zimmer was the defensive coordinator of Atlanta when Bobby Petrino just walked out on them and took a job at Arkansas, and then Mike Zimmer trashed the hell out of him, as Mike Zimmer want to do, after that in a press conference. So there's your Bobby Petrino connection, if you were wondering. Okay, give me your randomness. What do you got?
Okay, so we know the Vikings have a very rich history of like great wide receivers, from Chris Carter, Randy Moss, obviously right now with Justin Jefferson, Thielen and Diggs, just a couple of years ago. So Matthew Coller, I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario. We're going to take Justin Jefferson off the Minnesota Vikings, off this Vikings offense, and we're going to insert Randy Moss.
Oh.
What does KOC's offense look? How is it different, if it's different at all, with Randy Moss as opposed to Justin Jefferson? We know they're both great, but what does KOC's offense look like?
So I do think there's a difference between the two in their playing style, and the biggest difference is the deep ball. And Justin Jefferson is prolific when going down the field, say 20 yards. I think he's most excellent at all intermediate route running. So double moves that take him 15, 20 yards downfield, timing, post routes, stuff like that. Things that have him breaking inside, he often throws that head juke move, snaps back. Like, he's got just this myriad of moves that gets him open. But what Justin Jefferson does not do is just run straight down the sideline. That's not his route. And not only that, they did not have the quarterback who could throw that route. So I imagine that Jefferson, I got hit by a bug, that Jefferson Porch podcast, I've got the mosquito preventer over here, but I don't know what hit me. Anyway, so I think Jefferson probably is good straight down the sideline, but they didn't run a lot of that. With Randy Moss, that's where you begin, is how can we put him in spots where he is just running past somebody or drawing so much attention on the deep ball that we've got everybody else open. Now, where Randy Moss would have been different, though, is he mostly just lined up outside, because that's what you did with great wide receivers. Jerry Rice lined up more in the slot later in his career, and it kept his career going. But that was something that teams didn't really adopt from the 49ers with those great wide receivers. So now we see every wide receiver plays in the slot. Doesn't matter who you are. If it's Cooper Kupp, he does it a lot. But Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, every receiver has to play every different position. I think that he would have used Randy Moss's yards after catch even more to his advantage, as great as it was. You remember the punt return against Kansas City, like the explosiveness, the speed that he had, the touchdown against Dallas, the Thanksgiving game. One of those is a bubble screen, and he just explodes. there was so much of that at Marshall because it wasn't like Chad Pennington was throwing it 50 or 70 yards downfield.
Right.
I think KOC would work him underneath out of the slot more often. And I'll give you even a specific play that Justin Jefferson does all the time out of the slot that Randy Moss would annihilate. And I don't know if he ever ran this because they do it a lot more now. It's called the slot fade. And everybody knows what this looks like. The guy on the outside does a little hitch. So he keeps his corner there. And then out of the slot, you run a fade kind of to the corner, to the pylon, and you just throw it up. And that guy goes to get it. And Jefferson is insane at this route, and I think Randy Moss would probably be even better. So I'm saying that he probably catches, instead of catching 80 passes and 15 touchdowns and 1,300 yards, he probably catches like 120 passes. And less of them are deep, but there's just a lot more Randy Moss with the ball in his hands because I guarantee you defenses are trying as hard to stop Jefferson as they were Moss.
Yeah.
And with KOC's offense, they still can't do it.
Yeah, I remember it reminds me of like the first year that Mike Tice took over as head coach of the Vikings. And his opening press conference, he comes out, he talks about the Randy ratio. We're going to get the ball to Randy Moss as often as possible. Mike, you probably didn't want to tip your hand like that to everybody. But,
I don't think it was a revealing secret. I think that the people were aware of that.
Right. But, ultimately that year they did get the ball to Randy Moss a lot. I think he had over like 110 catches, 1,600 yards, something like that. And he was obviously very explosive. And there was a lot of, quick passes, bubble screens to try and get Randy Moss to, shake a defender and get out in space. And, we know nobody's running with him. So if that happens, a lot of times he was taking it all the way to the end zone. It wasn't quite as much of what we saw with, Brian Billick and some of the other offensive coaches before Ticey took over, where it was a lot of fly routes and Randy just going deep. They mix it up a little bit to try and get the ball into his hands a lot. So, yeah, I can kind of see KOC doing a lot of those same things.
I also think O'Connell really likes the trick play, sometimes too much. It has been brought up from time to time that he tried to throw a pass to Kirk Cousins, which is the most insane thing I've ever seen. But Randy Moss could really throw the ball.
Yeah.
And they might have come up with some even more trickery, or maybe it would be a little more successful. I don't know. They've tried it with Jefferson a few times. It hasn't really worked. Maybe he would use it too much. But I don't think we would see Randy Moss as a punt returner, probably ever. I don't think KOC would risk that, and we'll never see that from Jefferson. Here's another one, looking back at some players from the past. Let's say in some magical hypothetical universe, the Vikings made the Super Bowl. I know, don't shut off the podcast here. This is hypothetical. It could happen maybe someday. But let's say, and you got to pick who the quarterback from Vikings history was to play in that game in the Super Bowl, but it cannot be Fran Tarkenton and it cannot be Dante Culpepper. And anybody else gets to play the Super Bowl. Any other quarterback in Vikings history, one game, who are you putting in?
Brad Johnson.
Super Bowl champ.
Yep. And that's exactly why I would pick him, because he's already done it. We've seen him do it. And Brad Johnson, listen, I mean, people kind of crap on Brad Johnson being on that Tampa Bay team and just saying like, wow, if you can win a Super Bowl with Brad Johnson was pretty damn good.
Yep.
If you go back and you look at that season, the way he executed John Gruden's offense that year, he was fantastic. And we saw how well he played, when he was here with the Minnesota Vikings, when he had Randy Moss and Chris Carter to throw to. He played as well as any quarterback that we've seen in the last, 30 years of Vikings football. So if you're telling me the Vikings are going to go to the Super Bowl and I have to pick a quarterback that's not Tarkenton or Dante, it's Brad Johnson.
I think Brad Johnson's a really good pick. Now, if Tommy Kramer had a team, and let's say we could make Tommy healthy, and he had a team that was good enough, is Tommy Kramer a better quarterback than Brad Johnson? I think he was. I mean, relative to his era, that when he was healthy and had a good team, the one year he led the league in passer rating and really showed his true talent. But they were kind of a team in transition at that point when he came in and never quite got the opportunity because of injuries. He'd play like 9 games or something like that, and half of them are banged up. Tommy Kramer, 2-minute Tommy, might be a better choice there. Maybe a little more risky with the ball. Might depend on who we're playing, what our defense looks like, because if you got a great defense, then you probably want Brad Johnson to play. There might be some argument through Vikings history, and maybe people would be surprised that I would say this, to play Kirk out of all the Vikings quarterbacks.
Okay.
Because when you look at the numbers in comparison, and even in the 13-win season, a lot of comebacks and things like that, that if there was a good enough offensive line, maybe he's got an argument. You could also talk about a guy who stepped up in the playoffs. Wade Wilson had the great playoffs, and if you had the right team with him, he was willing to put the ball up in the air. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater's got a case for this. Played well enough to win in the playoffs, but then was let down. And then obviously we're talking about healthy Teddy and not post-injury Teddy. People will still bring that up. He is still the best Broncos quarterback since 2015. He wasn't that bad, which kind of tells you, I think, if he had never had that injury, that he could have been very good after that. But it's a hard choice. Let me give you Cunningham is certainly in this.
Mm-hmm. I think there will be some people that will see this and they're going to say, well, what about Brett Favre? I'm not sure I would trust Brett Favre in a Super Bowl. And he did win one. He played in two. When you think about the throwing across the body in the NFC title game, because not only are the Vikings in this hypothetical Super Bowl, damn it, I want them to win it. And I just, for as great as Brett Favre was in 2009, I just feel like if it's a one-game scenario, he's not at the top of the list of the guys that I would want to play, because he always seemed to kind of make that bad interception at the most inopportune time, and it just kind of derails and deflates your entire roster. So I don't know if I would have him as an option.
That's so hard, because Favre is clearly the best quarterback to ever play for the Vikings, not named Fran Tarkington, as far as his career accomplishments. Cunningham had problems in the playoffs too over his career, and played fine in that game against Arizona where Jake Plummer threw a couple picks and they had a pretty easy win to move on in the playoffs. Favre was amazing against Dallas that year, and overall in the playoffs he had his bad moments, but if you play enough playoff games you probably will have that happen. He should be the pick. I didn't say him because of exactly what you're talking about. It's like, well, we kind of saw that opportunity there. And then I might throw out Jeff George, just because if you need someone to gun the ball around like crazy, and if we've got the Randy Moss and you're in the Super Bowl, then he could put up like 400 yards passing or something. The right answer has to be Favre still, but I think that's what makes the question interesting, because when you went Brad Johnson, I was like, wait, is it not Favre? And it might not be, even though he was the best quarterback in the league that year. I don't know, but how do you not pick him?
I know,
right?
That's what makes it tricky, because he was so good that year, and obviously he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And he did go to a Super Bowl, and he did win it. He didn't play particularly well in that Super Bowl, and even in the next year against the Broncos, he wasn't really all that great in that one either. So it just feels like he's the guy that can get you there, but you almost want to have somebody else playing in the actual game, because it might give you a better shot at actually winning that one-game scenario.
Maybe it's unfair to Cunningham. I mean, Cunningham did put them in position to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He did enough to get them there, even though there was some miscues in that game, but everything's amplified when you know the result at the end. I think there's an argument for 5 different quarterbacks in Vikings history that I would end up picking. What else you got? What other random stuff you got?
So the other one another one of the questions I had was, for you, now you've been covering the Vikings. You got here in 2016, so you've done 8 Viking seasons. You're going into your 9th. Of your first 8 seasons, what has been the ultimate highlight of your first 8 years? And you cannot use the obvious answer, which is the Minneapolis Miracle.
The Minneapolis Miracle, right. That's that was going to be my answer. The ultimate highlight. So do you mean a game, a moment, something
Anything.
for me? Oh.
Anything that stands out.
Working with you, obviously, was the ultimate highlight. And Judd and Courtney, and we had a fun crew there when I got here. But I think that my favorite thing has been when I can tell the story of somebody, and this is a cheesy journalist thing, but when I can tell the story of somebody that fans don't really know from just seeing them out on the field and whatever, maybe this guy's just a role player or something, and a lot of times you don't know where this guy came from outside of his college, what he's been through in his life, and things like that. A couple examples were like Harrison Hand was a draft pick of theirs who had gone through a ton before he got to the NFL. His best friend was murdered. It was he had, I think that his uncle had passed away and his best friend murdered in a single year. So he had to get a hardship waiver, which is what you used to have to do to transfer before you could just transfer wherever. And so for him to make it through all that to get to the NFL was really cool. Kairos Tonga was adopted. His mom kind of left him early in life and he was in trouble, and then he was adopted and turned his life around and stuff like that. So guys who have very interesting backstories, guys who never ever should have made it. I'll give you one highlight was when I did a story on Adam Thielen right after his breakout game against the Houston Texans. And I did the story that everyone has done by now. Like, oh, how did he make it from Mankato? Did you guys know he's from Minnesota, Detroit Lakes? And so I did the whole thing, talked to the college coach, whatever else. And I remember thinking to myself, I hope that wasn't his only good game because this article might look really stupid. And then through the years, he became one of their best wide receivers. And I did another piece with him not too long after that, where I wrote about what a good basketball player he was. And so I was interviewing him, and these are the things that stick with me as much as the games, is sometimes things that people say to you. And so I was interviewing Thielen about playing basketball in school. And I said, well, good thing you didn't pick basketball for college, because he was thinking about that as opposed to football. I said, because obviously you would have never made it pro. And he said, nobody thought I was going to make it pro at football. How do you know? I'm like, that's one of the most baller things that anybody has ever said in any of my interviews. It was a really cool thing. And then I think of the funny stuff that happens. I brought this up on the show the other day, Kirk Cousins throwing it backwards, the Philadelphia Eagles trying a fake field goal with their kicker, like just random and really funny stuff. And I'll give you another funny story, because this is more of the stuff that pops out to me for the highlights, is just sometimes it's when you get a great answer, and sometimes when you get a terrible answer. It can both be funny and great. So I was doing a piece about QB sneaks. This was before the tush push, and the Vikings were about to play the Patriots. And my idea was, because the Patriots were so much better at quarterback sneaks than anybody else, that when we got on the conference call with Belichick, I was going to ask him about the QB sneak. So I did. So it comes to me, and it's my turn to ask Belichick a question. And I said, hey, Bill, you guys are converting 90-something% of your quarterback sneaks. This is by far the best in the league. Is there a key to that? And what I was thinking was, every once in a while, Belichick gets asked a random question, and then he would be great for this week. Yeah. He'll just talk for like 8 minutes straight, and he'll give this amazing history, whatever. So I said, Bill, what makes your team so good at these QB sneaks? And he goes, execution. That's it. That's all he said. And it was dead air. We're on a phone call, just dead air. Execution. That's it. On to the next question. I'm like, that's amazing.
And you thought you were going to get, like, because there was that bit a couple of years ago where somebody asked him about, like, long snapping. And he goes on, like, this long 10-minute answer about the history of long snapping and what goes into it and why teams keep long snappers and all that whole thing. And it was great. And you got execution.
I'll give you one more, or maybe two more. There's a lot. I really like this job. You notice I still do it. So the Vikings had Kai Forbath as their kicker. Now, I defended the heck out of Kai Forbath and thought he should have remained the kicker after he nailed the kick in the Minneapolis Miracle game. He never got credit for it. Nobody ever talked about how it wasn't cursed or anything. It was a massive kick. It was like 52 yards. But I did have a funny Kai Forbath moment. He was kind of a unique character. And I was doing this thing about tackling for kickers on kickoffs. Very relevant potentially this year. And so I asked Mike Prefer about how they tell the kickers and punters to tackle. And the answer was basically like, try to push them, but don't put your body in harm's way because we don't have another kicker, so we'd be up a creek. So I go to Kai Forbath, and I said, hey, when you have to make a tackle on a kickoff, what's the key to that? And he goes, like, are you serious? Like, why are you asking me this? I was like, well, I said it's kind of a quirky thing, kind of a funny thing that happens sometimes where a kicker, makes a great tackle. And he goes, I'm glad you find it funny. And that was the whole interview, which I thought was tremendous. So I go over to Ryan Quigley, who's one of the great personalities in the Vikings locker room in 2017. And I said, hey, same sort of question. Kai Forbath goes walking by, and Ryan Quigley says, oh, you should ask this guy. He knows all about it. Kai Forbath just stares at me, keeps on walking. And then Quigley gave me great answers, pointed out a few times it went well and not well for him, and things like that, but gave me the great breakdown of his entire mentality. But it was just perfect timing. He had just blown me off for this and hated the question more than anything. And then the punter says, hey, this guy will tell you. So it's stuff like that sticks with me the most. And I'll give you a game. New Orleans 2019.
Yeah.
First, best food I've ever had in my life. Shout out to New Orleans. Oh my God. Like, just the hands down single greatest food city in the United States of America. It's not even close. So that was good. But then the atmosphere of that game, the Superdome, the noise was, I would say, even beyond US Bank Stadium. Imagine Minneapolis Miracle level through the whole game. It's the loudest stadium in the league. And the back and forths of that game and in the locker room after the game, Andrew Sendejo, remember he had to play nickel corner for that game. And they had brought him back like mid-season. He had to play nickel corner because Mackenzie Alexander got hurt. And he also played every special teams rep as well. And he had the flu. And he played really well. And so I waited for him until everybody else was gone. No one else in the locker room except for a completely gassed Andrew Sendejo and me, and walked up to him and asked him about playing in that game. And I've never seen a player so exhausted. But he gave great answers about what he went through that week and everything else that led up to that. But it was one of those cool kind of everybody's gone moments, the quiet after the madness and everything else. And then you have a player who was a sort of a quiet hero of a game that, Kirk is the hero of the game. Rudolph's the hero. Thielen makes that catch over his shoulder. There was so many things that happened. And then I got lost in downtown New Orleans trying to walk back to my hotel, which was very scary. So I think that's it. I think my favorite part is kind of all those things. And that was a really long answer. So that's a great random question. What's your favorite part of having me here?
I'm glad you asked. It's a very short answer. Code words.
Yes, the code words.
That will forever be my favorite moment of working with you in Vikings coverage is your code words rant in 2018.
Okay, but give me this though. Yes, and if you're not familiar with it, just Google it. You'll find
it's on
it.
the internet somewhere.
All I'm going to say about that is that certain people agreed. That's all I'm going to say is that I came to find out that certain people agreed. Anyway. I want to know, though, since I've been here, what your, outside of the Minneapolis Miracle and outside of the New Orleans playoff game that we just talked about, give me 2 or 3 games that immediately come to mind if you're like, hey, best games. How about even this? We don't give Kirk enough credit for a lot of entertainment. He was entertaining. Yes. Give me the 3 Kirk games that you had the most fun watching.
2018 in Philadelphia was pretty fun, just because like the Vikings fan in me was kind of looking for the quasi-revenge game. I mean, it was a regular season game. The Eagles were not as good of a team as they were the year before, but you just kind of take those little victories when you can. But that game sticks out to me because of the Linval Joseph scoop and score in that game was just. It's just amazing. And then the moment of him getting the oxygen on the sideline, like afterwards, and that's just become like such an iconic image of Linval Joseph, just a terrific, great player for the Vikings during his time here.
He got a tattoo of that.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you telling me that the other day that he actually got a tattoo of that, which is amazing. So yeah, that game kind of stands out to me. Gosh, another Kirk game. Trying to think of big wins. Well, I think the comeback win over the Colts in 2022, the 33-0 come from behind victory, was big because they essentially had everything go wrong, everything possible go wrong in the first half of that game, and to have basically everything go right in the entire second half of that game. Now, the Colts did them a lot of favors because it was just not a very good Colts team, and Jeff Saturday was their coach, so of course that helped a lot. But to put something like that together, the largest comeback in NFL history, I think is one that really stands out. And obviously, I think the game in Buffalo that same season was a big game because, Kirk made some really good throws. We know about the catch with Justin Jefferson. The scramble that Kirk made, I think it was in the fourth quarter to get down inside the 20-yard line, down inside, he got him down to inside the 10 or something like that, was just a really a rare moment where we saw Kirk Cousins really do something really tough and gritty and making a big time play. So those are kind of the three games during the Kirk era that stand out to me.
I'll throw out a couple of ones that are maybe less notable because the score wasn't that close. I mean, when you have a comeback or something crazy like that. Hopefully people can't hear the lawn mowing that is happening now. But when you have a comeback or something like that, it's so memorable. What happened in Buffalo was insane. And some of those things, Kirk lit the house on fire and then came to put it out. So he got them behind from Indianapolis by throwing an interception, although Jalen Reagor probably ran the wrong route on that, I think. And in Buffalo, it's the same kind of thing. The first half of that game did not play very well, had a pick, and then ends up bringing them back. Got a lot of help from Josh Allen in that game with numerous turnovers. But two games where Kirk Cousins played in big moments, absolutely spectacular football. 2019 against Philadelphia. They were still a good team with high expectations, and he probably played his best statistical game. Annihilated them. I mean, every deep pass to Stephon Diggs, every play action, him and Kevin Stefanski and Gary Kubiak, one heartbeat in that game. They were incredible. I remember a deep, over type of route that he led the guy so perfectly. When you watch it on film, it was one of those when he lets it go, you go, how is that going to get to that guy? And just he had that ability to lead people, which J.J. McCarthy is going to have to work on to get to Kirk Cousins' level of that. And another one is the first game of the Kevin O'Connell era. Yes, the Packers did try to guard Justin Jefferson with defensive ends, linebackers, water boys, cheesehead randos from the stands, as opposed to Jair Alexander. I don't know why. I'll never quite understand it. But no, I mean, Kirk Cousins to come out and play like that in the opener of the KOC era was pretty significant, I think. And it was memorable because of that. It wasn't wow, the earth has changed entirely, but you did get a sense from that game. This connection between KOC and Kevin O'Connell, that's him, and Kirk Cousins might be legit. And there might be something here right from the very outset.
Yeah, I mean, that game was just remarkable, and there was so many, just fireworks with that game because it was the first game of the year. It's against the Packers, and Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson are just lighting the world on fire that day. And yeah, to your point, that was a really strong early indication that, oh yeah, this offense, we don't know what this defense is going to look like, but this offense is going to be pretty damn potent. And, and it was that year. I mean, they won 13 games and we saw what happened in the playoffs, but, it was a really fun year. And I think it really was an early sign that this team has a pretty good offensive mind as a head coach, and they've got obviously a superstar wide receiver and a quarterback that can go out and execute the offense. And so it ended up being kind of an early sign that at least the season itself was going to be pretty fun.
All right, let me throw this random at you. Do you have any more? Do you have more random?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, that's it. All right, so let me throw this one at you. 6 first-round quarterbacks this year. I want you to put them in order 1 to 6 in how good their careers will be. So I don't know how to evaluate that, but who will have, let's just go QB wins. had a guest the other day who was really offended by QB wins. Mike Payton, my friend from Detroit, is not a fan of that. Understand, anyone who covers Matthew Stafford doesn't like QB wins. But let's just say, who of the 6 quarterbacks selected, what will the order be for who ends up with the most career victories?
All right, I have to.
You got to look at the 6 I could just tell them to you if you want.
Yes, why don't we do that?
Okay. Well, it was Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, and Bo Nix. Well, how about you go worst to first? Maybe that's easier to do.
Worst, I'm going to go Bo Nix. Not even because I think he's the worst one. I just don't. I mean, we know Sean Payton has a history of having great offenses, but that was with Drew Brees. And when he became the coach of the Saints had signed Drew Brees, who had started to kind of establish himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the league at that point. How Sean Payton handles developing a young quarterback with not really a lot of weapons to work with either on offense, what is that going to look like? I don't know. And is that going to bode well for Bo Nix long term? Because, Sean Payton going to be able to put something together for him to have early success, and Bo Nix might be a guy that needs to have some early success to end up having a good career. So I'll go with him at number 6. I'm probably going to go Drake May 5.
Tough situation.
Yeah, very tough situation. Again, kind of the same thing where the physical tools are there, but are the Patriots going to be able to put enough around him over the next couple of years to allow him to really grow and develop? Are they going to throw him out there right away early? I would highly advise against doing something like that. So, yeah, I'll have Drake May number 5. I'm going to go Jaden Daniels 4.
Oh, okay. Are you not a huge Jaden Daniels believer?
No, I do believe in him, but again, it's kind
Washington.
It's Washington. And, Dan Quinn, pretty good coach, got the Falcons to the Super Bowl, but, I think a lot of that had to do with Kyle Shanahan running that offense and Matt Ryan being a veteran and MVP. So we'll see how that plays out. I do believe in Jaden Daniels' ability, but again, it's like, does Washington have enough to really kind of put enough around him to be successful? I will go J.J. McCarthy number 3. And now we're at a point now where I think, like, all of these guys, I'm not as worried about the top 3 guys as I am about the bottom 3. But I'll go J.J. McCarthy number 3. I think the Vikings have a really good setup for him. He's probably not quite ready to play yet, but I think when that time comes, when he is ready to play, I think he's going to come out and play really, really well. You and I, we both love Michael Penix. I think he's going to be fantastic. So he's at my number 2. And who knows how this thing's going to play out with Kirk Cousins, in the beginning. So we might see Michael Penix this year. We might see him next year playing. And I think he's just got the physical tools, the arm to really be successful. And I think they've got the right idea in place down there in Atlanta of there's no pressure to put Penix out there right away because you have Kirk Cousins. And I think with him having all of the experience, when the time comes when he is ready to play, he's going to come in and he's going to do a pretty good job. And I think Caleb Williams, I love what the Chicago Bears are doing. I know Vikings fans don't want to hear that, but I think they have a really good setup and foundation for him to come in and have some early success. Now, he's got some things that he's got to, really kind of clean up. But you look at the weapons that they've given him on offense, they've still got a ton of cap space. I like what they're doing on defense with the defensive-minded head coach and Matt Eberflus. I think Caleb Williams, and we know about the physical talents, I think Caleb Williams is going to have the best career out of all of them. And that's scary for Vikings fans because that means he's going to be with the Bears for 10, 15 years, and he's going to be a problem.
So the only reason I might not pick Penix number 2 would be just his age. And, I mean, if we're talking about career wins, if J.J. McCarthy turns out to be good and Michael Penix, McCarthy could play longer than Michael Penix can. Penix has a more serious injury history, which might end up playing into a shorter career for him overall. That would be somewhat of a concern. it's impossible not to pick Caleb Williams number 1 because historically, number 1 picks have by far the best chance of succeeding. There is a large drop-off in success rate from number 1 even to number 2 picked quarterbacks in NFL history, much less, going all the way down to the 5th quarterback taken in J.J. McCarthy. Now, it doesn't go on a straight line down. It's really the first guy by far and away, and then the rest are pretty close together for their chances to succeed. So Williams has to be number 1. You could put McCarthy number 2 based on the circumstances that he is going to have. The hard thing about McCarthy number 2 is the division that he's going to play in.
Yeah.
For the first few years of his career, we could project out. It's not going to be easy. If Caleb Williams is any good at all, then that's going to be hard. Detroit will be hard for at least several more years. And if Jordan Love is good, then you're talking about sometimes you might have a great team and, lose 4 division games because you're playing all really good division teams. I still might put him up there. The hard one is Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
It's a new franchise. It's no more Dan Snyder. So they're running it more reasonably. It's a guy who owns a basketball team. I think he'll let the football people run the football, which could be a massive improvement. So I'm going to say that I think Jaden Daniels might end up with the second most wins.
Okay.
If they rebuild it correctly. He is on the older side, though. Gosh, that one's hard.
It's hard, man.
It is really hard because the Drake May, how much do we buy that he's going to just be set back for several years? Because that's very plausible, but what if it's only 1 year? What if it's like Jared Goff where it's only 1 year and then they spend a bunch of money and it works out and they end up rebuilding that team very quickly? Drake May is super talented, but he's very volatile, I think, in his play. I might actually go Williams, McCarthy, Penix. It's going to be funny to see how wrong this is, like in years. Williams, McCarthy, Penix, Daniel, no.
It's hard.
Daniels May. Nix is the only other obvious one. That is a hard random question. Well,
but here's what's interesting about it though, because I think all 6 of these guys have a lot of talent and I think they're all going to have the opportunity to be good. I don't really look at any of them and say, "Oh yeah, he's going to suck." He doesn't have it. I think a lot of it just is going to come down to the circumstances that they're in and how well their teams, especially the guys that I had at 4, 5, and 6, how well those teams are able to sort of build around them and provide enough weapons, support, infrastructure, stability. All of that is going to come into play for all these guys because they're all talented. They're all really good. So it's really going to come down to what the organizations that are, that have them do to sort of build around them. And I think that's really going to determine their success.
And I'm trying to figure out, too, not which guy I like the most, but which team in a year or two will reach a peak where they could win 10 games plus over a couple of years where you can really rack up the wins.
Right.
When you look at the NFC East, the Cowboys are probably in their last year or two of this window where everybody is on rookie contracts like Micah Parsons and, CD Lamb. Can they maintain success like past that? Sure, but probably Super Bowl window is closing. The Giants might just continue to be bad for a while. So there's an opportunity there. Philadelphia is probably on a bit of the decline. So from where they reached the Super Bowl, you have a chance to be Washington and shoot up to the top and have Jay Daniels be great. With the Patriots, it's a little harder to see because Miami's got a really good coach. The Bills are going to continue to have a great quarterback. But the Jets are kind of a mess. Maybe you could see that in a year or two with them. It's just harder because they're so far down and out. I don't know the answer. I have honestly no idea. But it should be interesting to play out.
We may not know with Drake May for like 3 or 4 years if it's even going to work with him. You know what I mean? I mean, we know the talent is there, but the Patriots are that roster is so freaking bad right now that it's going to take at least a couple of years before we even have an idea of how good Drake May is. And my concern for him is that they're going to throw him out there too early and, maybe not right out of the gate because I think they got Jacoby Brissett back out there, right?
Yeah.
So you got to think maybe he's going to be the week 1 starter for them. But, does Gerard Mayo decide to pull the plug on that if they're 0-5 and put Drake May in there? I mean, I don't think that's going to go particularly well. So, and what kind of impact does that have on Drake May going forward for his entire career. It's going to be really fascinating to find out.
And we might be giving Penix too much credit because he could be 26 by the time he actually starts.
Right.
And several seasons behind these other guys. So Jaden Daniels will win games. We just don't know how many, but he's going to have a 2-year head start. He could win 13 or 15 games in his career before even Michael Penix gets on the field. So maybe I might go Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, Penix, May, and Nix. I don't feel good about any of this, which is really the whole tagline to the podcast in general. You just don't feel good about any of this. Anyway, this has been really fun. How good are the vibes on this porch?
It's awesome, man.
Right? There's
it.
Lights too, but there's no reason to turn them on. It's in the middle of the day.
This was fun.
It is fun. Yeah, we'll do more porch podcasts as the summer plays out. And this was a perfect day because it's not 97 degrees.
Right.
Because it does get a little toasty. There's a fan up here as well.
Nice.
It's a great place. So thanks everybody for watching / listening. Thanks, Manny, for stopping by after work and hanging out. And we'll do another porch podcast again, hopefully very soon. Dane Mizutani, having been to my house, has already requested a porch podcast. So he's definitely the next man up. So thanks everybody for coming along for the ride, and we'll catch y'all next time. Football.